All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this session of A Course in Miracles, Workbook Lesson 140. And we actually going to get into the workbook lesson today as I took a detour on yesterday. And so this is considered part two. Good. My name is Oliver, and I am your temporary guide this morning. I am your host. I am the co founder of Truly Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that are sponsoring these workbook lessons and are delighted to do so. And so we are here to help advance your awakening, your um, enlightenment, whatever. We're just here to be real and to discover the reality of not only our own self, but the reality of all humanity, to get a grander understanding of our Creator, that which is what the one source of all things, that which is responsible for all things, and just find our place in that place of reality. And so this morning workbook lesson 140 says that only salvation. When it says only, when something is only, that means that there's nothing else. There's no options. Only salvation. What is salvation? As the Course describes it from God's point of view. Well, salvation from God's point of view is God's promise to himself. That which he is and that which he extends or that which he creates remain as it was created, as it was extended, and most of all, that God itself, or love itself, which we know that God is love, is unalterable and unchangeable, and it remains as it has always been. And so salvation is something that you can count on, something you can hang your hat on, because it's already been completed. It was completed before it was done. It's a finished work. It is what you can bank on. And it's God's promise to himself that all things remain as they are, that heaven remains as it is, that the laws and the thoughts of God remain in the realm of reality, never to be altered, never to be changed, never to be threatened, never to be attacked in reality. What is salvation? No more than that God promised that what the real remains the real, and the false remain the false, regardless of the appearances, regardless of what it sounds like, smells like, tastes like, feels like, looks like. No matter how much of solid granite it looks. If you go out and you go to a tree that's 100 years old, and you go to the trunk of that tree, and you kick that tree, and you hit that tree, and bang that tree, and that tree seems solid and eternal. But in reality, reality, that tree is only a temporary experience. It's not eternal. Therefore, it's not real. It has a beginning and an end. Just because something feels solid, because something looks real, doesn't mean that it is. In the world, there's an entertainment community called illusionists, or master illusions, and they do tricks and they perform right before your very five physical senses. Unbelievable feats. But there's something that it's not right. There's something is not true about all of it. It's just that you don't know it, can't see it, can't feel it, can't hear it. But at the base of it, something is not right. Something is not eternal. Something is not permanent. God, in his infinite wisdom, built within himself the unalterability and the inchangeability of what love is. And love is everything, and love is all there is. And so only salvation, that's what he means. Everything else is a temporary experience. Only salvation. It says only salvation can be said to actually cure. Cure means what? Cure means what? Permanently put things back into its original state. Okay, so salvation, so since everything is in its original state, and so salvation is only a concept to bring the illusion to the truth, because in reality there's nothing to save. There's nothing that's been lost from God's perspective, and so there's nothing to save. So salvation is a cure to those that are dreaming that they're separate, to those that are dreaming that something happened. So salvation is an answer to, again, it is like the atonement. It's an answer to the belief in separation, that something happened. It says nothing happened. Why? And so God promised that nothing happened. So it's in his promise that all humanity will eventually wake up and come home, or wake up and realize and recognize that they are already home, recognize that they've been on a journey without a distance. And that is what like a dream is. Like this morning, I woke up, I had dreams last night, and I can remember them from last night. I can remember some of the details of them last night. And it was while I was dreaming it was almost like it was real. It was almost like I was like in different places, going with different places, being with different people, doing different things. It seemed so real at the time that I was dreaming the dream. But in reality, I had moved one iota. In reality, physically, I was still right there in my bed. In reality, nothing happened. Those were just images. Those were just appearances. Those were just thoughts of separation. And so in reality, nothing happened, so nothing needed to be done. But for the dream itself, to wake me up from the dream, what God promised is what is for the dream. So salvation is for the dream-like illusion. And I hope that makes sense to you. So today we're going to talk about only salvation can be said to cure. Because in the world, we have what we call the field of medicine. We have the field of, and that medicine can be in different forms, from psychological medicine, mental medicine, physical medicine. And we appreciate the medical community. However, it is only it doesn't get to the root cause. Let's put it to you that way. It helps to manage pain, help to alleviate discomfort until the body, which is completely neutral, or until the mind, which is what is really sick, can be cured. And so medicine, in and of itself has a good purpose. However, it is not the end all, because it can't really get to the source of the problem, which is in the mind. And we've already established that the mind is not in the body, and the mind and the body are not the same. They're not joined. And so here we're talking about getting to the cause and not to the effects. When we see things manifested in the body, those are the effect of a cause. What is the cause? The cause generally is in our thinking. It's generally in our mental state that creates an effect that shows up in the body. So real cure happens where the source of the problem is, and it's not in the body, but it's in the mind. So that's why it says salvation can only cure. Salvation, God's plan for salvation can only cure. And we're not talking about salvation from hell or salvation from being, deserving of punishment. That's a myth. That's a religious idea that hasn't helped anybody. In a sense, it hasn't. However, what we are talking about is God's plan for salvation. And God's plan for salvation is that what he promised, he made an oath with himself that all will wake up from this dreaming state, this belief in false identity, this belief in body identity, and come to know their true self as a formless and timeless being. And so the word cure itself is a word that cannot be applied to any remedy this world accepts as beneficial. In other words, the world can't cure anything. It says cure. The word cannot be applied to any remedy that the world accepts as beneficial. What the world perceives as therapeutic is but what will make the body better. So a more appropriate term is therapeutic. We need some therapy. When it tries to heal the mind, notice now, when it tries to heal the mind, it sees no separation from the body. So there's a perception that the mind and the body are one joint entity. And that's not the case. So just at the foundation of their approach to healing, the assumption is not quite accurate. The mind and the body are not one and the same. Your mind can go places your body will never go. You know what I mean? Through the gift of imagination. You can take your mind can go anywhere. Your mind can create places to go that your body will never go. So that lets you know that the mind and the body are not what joined, is one. They're separate. They're separate entities. And so, when it tries to heal the mind, it sees no separation from the body, where it thinks the mind exists. So in the perception of body identification, there's a belief that the mind exists in the body. It's forms of healing. So the world's forms of healing thus must substitute illusion for illusion. Why? Because the body in and of itself is not real. And so with that being said, the solutions that are created to heal another illusion, it's an illusion for an illusion. So the body in and of itself is not real, and the solutions are not real. Why? Because the solutions are directed towards that where the healing is not needed, and that is in the body. So it's an illusion for an illusion. And so it says, one belief in sickness takes another form. And so the patient now perceives himself as well. So in the world where there is a belief that the body and the mind are one, in the world where there's a belief that the body is what needs healing, ultimately what happens is that, we move from one illusion to another. And that's what it says here. The patient now perceives himself as well. However, here comes a different form. Here comes a different form of the same need for healing, just in a different form, where if the emphasis is on the body, he is not healed. So in reality, we is not healed. Why? Because healing is needed in the mind that believe that is separate. Healing is needed in the mind that believes that the body and the mind are joined, and that the mind is inside the body. That in and of itself needs to be cured or needs to be healed. That idea, that perception, that false belief. It says, so he is not healed. He merely had a dream that he was sick because of what? Pain in the body, because of dysfunction in the body. And in the dream, he found a magic formula, a therapy to make him well. Yet, he has not awakened from the dream. So what true healing comes when one wakes up from the belief in separation. It is in the mind. It is in our thinking, which affects our perception. And if our perception is wrong, we turn the focus from the mind that believe it's separate to the body. That's now what becomes the main object of the dream. And so now the focus is on whether the body feels well, or the body feels good, or whether the body has pain, or whether the body doesn't have pain, or whether there's discomfort, or whether there's not discomfort. And the body is neutral. The body is neutral. The body only becomes a place of punishment to a mind that believes that it's separate. And to keep the ego's thought system is to keep the focus off the place where it's needed, and that is on our mind. That's why we're going through a mind training here, because if the mind is healed, and the mind can only be healed through the salvation, the plan of God, the knowing of the self, the truth. It can only be healed through the truth. So the ego's plan is to keep our focus on the body. And we see in this world how much focus is placed on the body. How much is subscribed to the body. How many medical solutions have been developed for the body. And all the time, it's the mind that's sick. Once the mind is healed of the belief in separation, and the body is no longer given purposes it cannot achieve, roles it cannot handle, and the body becomes what it can be in its role. The Course said the body becomes a healthy instrument. It becomes It becomes a good vehicle to navigate us in this three-dimensional world. No more, no less. But when the body becomes the central thing, when the body becomes our personal identification, who we think we are, now we have given the body purposes it cannot handle. And it will break down. It will malfunction. It will what? It will malfunction in the role that we've given it because it cannot handle it. I hope this is making sense. The body has usefulness in its rightful purpose. The body has usefulness in its rightful purpose. In fact, the Course says it is but a communication device. A device by which we're able to communicate something. What are we communicating? Our reality, our true self. Through a mind that is healed, through a mind that is whole and complete, through a mind that has forgiven, through a mind which is but a mechanism by which we are able to connect, the seen and the non-seen, the formless and the form. The mind becomes a useful vehicle, a a faithful servant to demonstrate and communicate our reality. It says, he has not seen the light that would awaken him and end the dream. If we think that through, removing the pain out of our thumb is a real cure or is a real healing, all the time the mind is full of fear and anguish. That's not true healing. It says he has not seen the light. What difference does the content of a dream make in reality? What difference does one form of discomfort makes compared to another form of discomfort, when all the while the mind is still running amok, running wild, lacks peace, lacks Christ's vision? So what difference does the content of the form life makes? Whether one can run fast or can't run at all, whether one, have pain or don't have pain, whether one feel good or don't feel good. What difference does that make when the mind is still what? The mind is still sick. It says, either sleeps. This is what matters. It says this is what really matters. Either one sleeps or wakens. To sleep denotes sickness. Waken denotes healing or a real cure. It says that either one sleeps or wakens. There is nothing in between. You're either one or another. We're either healed or we're not. Really healed. We're either cured or we're not. We're either holy or we're not. There's no in between. We're either one with God or we're not. There's no in between. We're either sinless or we're not. We're either guiltless or we're not. We're either real or we are not. There is no in between. And so it says the happy dream. Notice now, the happy dream. If we're going to be inside a dream of separation, the Course says, well, you might as well be in there and be happy. And there's only way to be happy within a dream, and that's it, to be awake within the dream. That's the only way to be happy. It's to be awake within the dream. He calls it a happy dream. It brings about, it said it brings, it says the happy dream that comes from being awake brings are different from the dreaming of the world, where one can merely dream he is awake. The dream's forgiveness, let the mind perceive, does not induce another form of sleep, so that the dreamer dreams another dream. His happy dreams are heralds of the dawn of truth upon the mind. They lead from sleep to gentle waking, so that dreams are gone completely, and thus they cure for all eternity. And so what the Course is saying here is, ultimately, is we experience real healing, the real cure, that is eternal only through the awakening, only through the knowing of yourself, only through the acceptance of the atonement, only through the plan of salvation that God has what? That God has put in motion. Nothing else cures. Nothing else heals. And then what's so amazing about it is God guarantees that all of us eventually, it's inevitable that all of us eventually will come to the light. All of us eventually will come to the place in our life where we said there must be a better way, or there must be a real cure here. There's something that I don't know, that if the knowing of it, if I knew it, everything would change. And that is so true. And that's what he's saying here. And thus the cure is for all eternity. It says atonement, see? Then it turns to the real cure. It says atonement. We talked about atonement the last 3 or 4 days. And what that is, that nothing happened, that we remain as God created us. That the mind that thought it what separated didn't do anything, but fall into a dreamlike state and dreamed of what being separate, and dreamed of what being in a body, in body identification, and dreamed of what being sick in the body, and manifesting cures for the body. Even when that happened, thinking that was healed, when even in that exchange, nothing happened. Nothing. That was not a real cure. That was not a real healing. We was just trading one illusion for another. But the atonement, God's plan for salvation, it eliminates all illusions. It eliminates all falsity. And we finally come face to face with the truth of who we are. And so atonement heals with certainty. It is absolute certain. When you wake up, when you recognize your true self, healing occurs automatically. Automatically. And it doesn't matter what the body feels like, looks like, function like. Doesn't matter what goes on in the body, because the body is still a part of the dream of separation. But the body, once the mind is brought into the truth of who it is, the body falls into alignment just the same. And it said, and listen, no, immediately, even though the body still may be what? Acting up. Still, the body still may be what? Not function properly. But that is not the barometer of healing and cure. What's the barometer? But one being healed and one being cured is what happens within the mind. What is accepted within the mind. That's the barometer. Healing doesn't wait for time. Healing doesn't wait for form to change. Healing happens instantly to anyone who accepts the atonement for themselves. With no reference, with no influence from form and time. Healing happens in the mind. And so, it says the atonement heals with certainty and cures all sicknesses. For the mind, see, that's where sicknesses lie. For the mind which understands that sickness can be nothing but a dream. Sickness is nothing but a dream. Is not deceived by form or forms the dream might take. Boy, this is so important. For the mind which understands that sickness can be nothing but a dream. And a dream is nothing but an idea of separation from God and from one another. So the life that we live most of the time on this three-dimensional plane is a dream life. Why? Because there is this idea that we believe that the separation is real. And then we go into doubly sleep in that life when we would fall asleep and dream within the dream. But true awakening happens when the atonement heals, and it heals certainly. It says sickness where guilt is absent cannot come. Where a mind that is healed, a mind that is free from guilt and sin consciousness and fear. It says sin can't enter there. Once the mind embraces its holiness, its wholeness, its completeness, once the mind accepts its guiltlessness, like Ephesians and Colossians says, and Hebrews says, once the mind embraces its original state of being blameless, irreprovable, holy, and without blame. Once the mind embraces and acknowledges and recognizes and embraces that, healing cannot enter in that place. Sickness cannot enter into that space. Illusion can only enter to illusions. Illusions can't enter into light. It can only be brought to the light to be consumed by the light. And so it says sickness where guilt is absent cannot come, for it is but another form of guilt. Sickness is just another form of guilt. It says sickness is a dream, which is a form of guilt. And sickness is it's just another form of guilt. It says atonement does not heal the sick. Atonement does not heal the sick, for that is not a cure. It takes away the guilt, is what atonement does. That makes the sickness possible. So atonement is for the root cause, which is guilt and sin and fear. It doesn't heal, because in reality, nothing needs to be healed. It takes away the guilt. It takes away the guilt, which the sin consciousness, and the fear, which is the cause of sickness. And the sickness is in the mind. And that is cure indeed. When guilt is removed out of our consciousness, out of our awareness. When sin consciousness is removed out of our consciousness and awareness. When doubt and unbelief is removed out of our consciousness and awareness, that's when true healing comes. That is what is called a real cure. So the source of the sickness is the guilt. The source of the guilt is sin consciousness, the belief in sin, the belief that we're actually separate. And the fear that comes out of the guilt causes the mind that believe is separate to attack the body. And so the body that has been attacked is only the effect of sin consciousness that leads to guilt, the belief in punishment, which eventually leads to fear of the future, which eventually leads to what? The body being becomes the place of attack. And thus you see the body go through the changes. Though you see the body malfunction, disease. And then when you try to bring solutions just to the body and don't get to the source of the problem, which is sin consciousness, which we've already established that sin is not real. It's all part of what is made up through the ego thought system. So do you see the progression here? Do you see what is really the real source that's been covered up? And it's covered up in the mind by focusing on the body. So we're looking for the cure. We're looking for the healing in the place where it's not been placed. God placed healing in the mind. And so that's why we're going through this entire year of mind training. Why? We're getting to the source. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of the mind. We're working on the real source here. This is so important, and most people don't understand this. To not understand this is to be asleep. And to be 100% dependent upon medicine, to be 100% dependent upon mankind to bring solutions to a mind that believes is separate. Is to what? Is to get on the merry-go-round of the ego and look and seek and do not find. That's the idea. Or is this making logical sense? If you look for cure in a place that is not, you're not going to find it. If you look for healing in a place that is not, you're not going to find it. If you try to bring cure and healing by working on the effects, it's not going to be permanent. It's not going to be maintained. It only masks the symptoms. Real cure, real healing comes when a mind has been freed of sin consciousness and guilt and fear. I know personally what that feels like. I know how damnable that can be when a mind is sick because it believes in sin and guilt and fear. I know that personally. I've been there. It took me into dark places, real dark places. But thank God for His plan. Thank God for His atonement. Thank God for His reality, His reality that is endless. Now I stand in a place of complete whole and holiness and healness. And I'm very aware and I recognize my true self. I have accepted the atonement for myself. And I'm here along with all those that's been on this journey with me and those millions that are in the world that have accepted atonement for yourself as your brother, to say this is the real cure. The knowing of yourself. Truth is the only thing that can really heal and really cure. So, it is the atonement that takes away the guilt, the sin consciousness, and the fear. And even God's not going to do that for us. He has provided the resources for us to do it ourselves. We have to accept it for ourselves. Your mother's or your parents' acceptance of reality for themselves doesn't do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. You have to come to know your real self. Whether you're 5 or 10 or 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, or even 100. You have to accept it for yourself. Your parents can help by shining light to help you see, turn to the light within. But you still have to do it for yourself. And so when guilt and sin and fear is removed from the mind, it says that that is cure indeed. For sickness now is gone, with nothing left to which it can return. So the mind that becomes healed becomes like an altar unto reality. And sickness cannot enter there. Guilt and sin consciousness and fear cannot enter in a mind that's been completely healed and made whole. And that comes through the knowing of the self, which is the truth that sets you free. Like Jesus said in many occasions, you shall know the truth, meaning what? You shall know, or you shall experience a mind that is free of sin consciousness, guilt, and fear. And your knowing of that, that is what makes you free. That is what makes you whole. That is what is the real cure. Because you have accepted the fact that you are sinless and guiltless. You have what? You have been transformed, and you are no longer conforming to the teaching of this world. That man is separate, man is guilty, man is what? Man deserved punishment. And if it wasn't for, an act of love, we will all be doomed. That sounds good. But it ain't good enough. Because you've all gone through that path, and still, I know my experience is the people that are most religious are the one that's most sin conscious. They're the one most guilty, walking guilt and fear. Because that's man's plan for salvation. God's plan for salvation, it's never changed. And what has never changed, he's saying, is you've never changed. I've created you in my image and in my likeness. I created you just like myself. And I am sinless, I am guiltless, and I'm fearless. And so are you. You remain as I created you, regardless of who told you, what happened, what's in history. He said, regardless of all of that, you got to make up your mind. Just like Jesus had to make up his mind. And he was determined to hold on to the truth, to the point that he went he took 40 days off and went into the wilderness to once and for all settle within his mind what was true. And when he came out, he left all delusions in the desert. He left all sin consciousness in the desert. And the religious people of his day called him a sinner. Called him a wine bibber. Said he was hanging out with the raunchy people. See? That perception was coming from people who was asleep. People who was ridden in sin consciousness, guilt, and fear. Even though they wore long robes and they toted the holy book and they, presided over the religious services. They was full of sin, consciousness, guilt, and fear. And Jesus had to even overcome their standing in a place of authority. He had to overcome their judgments of him. He knew the truth. He knew his Father. And they was trying to make of him or his Father an unloving Father. Like we try to remake God in our own image. And make God to fit in our own religious systems. And it won't work. But when you come to a place in your life where you say there must be a better way, and there is, when you come to a place in your life where you really embrace and accept the atonement, when you embrace the salvation, the promise of God that you remain as you were created, as the holy son, the holy home of God. You are the whole place of holiness. Just like Ephesians 1 said, before the foundation of the world, God said it was already determined that you would be holy, and you are holy. That only means whole and complete. That you will be holy and without blame. That means without guilt. Before him, or before love, or before the truth. And that's the way it is. It remains that way. You are holy and without blame before love, before God. You may not be before man, but before love and before God, you are. Before a man that's sleeping, you may not be, but what? For the God that is awake, you are. For your brother or sister that is awake, you are. I know that all humanity, I know it without a doubt. With all certainty, I know that humanity remains as God created humanity, just like himself. It's just a matter of what? Like it says, a matter of you either sleep or you awake. And anyone that promotes separation and division, anyone that promotes sin consciousness, or anyone that promotes sin, anyone that promotes what? Guilt. In other words, that's why Jesus said, do not judge. Because your judgment is going to be what? A judgment of unrighteousness, a judgment of guilt. He said, do not judge, lest you be judged. Anyone that promotes fear, fear-based theology, fear-based politics, fear-based business, fear-based anything, relationships, wherever there's fear, promote it. Where one is trying to what? Suppress another. Where there's inequality, that's promoted. It's an attack on reality. But remember, the Course says what? Nothing real can be threatened. So actually, it's an attack on one's own illusion. It's illusions attacking illusions. And if you're in the space of illusions, you're going to feel the pain and suffering of that. There's only one way out. Only salvation can be said to cure. And that's our lesson for today. So it says, peace be to you who have been cured in God. Have you been cured in God? Have you accepted the atonement for yourself? Do you know that only salvation can cure? Only the reality that nothing has happened can cure. In other words, you can erase all the history of humanity. Just take God's big eraser and erase all the history, because most of the history just promoted separation and division. It created the sickness. It created the sin consciousness, guilt, and fear. So take the big eternal eraser and erase all the history of humanity. Because part of the problem is that what? We're sold on the history. We're holding on to what? Sin consciousness, fear, and guilt based on what has happened in history. We're holding on to grievances and resentments because of what had happened to history. And that's what covers up the light in us. So take God's big what? Atonement eraser, and you just erase all of history as though it's never happened. You would be better off. And just stand in the presence of now. And embrace only what is now. And that is what? The love of God is present right now. Love is always present. In fact, the Course says, the aim of this Course is to remove all the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. Well, what are all of the blocks? All the accumulation of the ego thought system of separation, all of the accumulation of the history of this world, where man has tried to find his way back to the Father by creating its own plan, its own idea of what God is and who man is, and how that makes sense. Just erase it all, forget it all, release it all, and stand in this moment as the revealed, holy, sinless, guiltless, fearless, complete, eternal expression of God. It's who you are. Just that simple. That is certain. That is the only way. That is the certainty that God guaranteed, that God promised, that God made an oath. So he says, peace be to you who have been cured in God. That is the true cure. He said, and not in idle dreams. For cure must come from holiness. And holiness cannot be found where sin is cherished. If you're still cherishing the fact that you're a sinner saved by grace, that's not the cure. If you're still cherishing the fact that God has punished his son, that God believes in sacrifice, if you're still cherishing the fact that God is angry, that God was the author of all the anger and all of the fighting and the destruction, that God has darkness within his nature, if you still hanging on to any of those ideas, if you're still cherishing any of that, any of the fear-based theology, if you're cherishing the fact that there's something in the future that you're waiting for, some kind of judgment, some kind of appearance, if you're still hanging on to that, if you're still cherishing those religious ideas, he said, you're not been cured. You're still looking in the wrong place. You're still looking for salvation where it's not. He said, until you embrace the atonement and accept and recognize the atonement for yourself, that you remain right now as God created you. Until that is embraced, you're not cured. And so you'll continue to dabble in sin consciousness and guilt and fear. And that fear has torment. Fear has torment. And so God abides in holy temples. And not talking about bodies. A holy temple is a mind that has been cured. Is it a sinless, fearless, guiltless mind? God reside in a place of holiness and freedom. He is barred where sin has entered. Where does sin enter? It enters the mind. So the mind that's holding on to sin consciousness, you bar out God. You put bars up or fences up, he can't get in. He says, yet there is no place where he is not. And therefore, sin can have no home in which to hide from his beneficence or his benefits. What is his benefits? The atonement. What is God's benefit? Salvation. There is no place where holiness is not. So even in your dream of separation, even in the one that is asleep to his true identity, God resides there. You're just not recognizing it. You're just not recognizing it. It says, there is no place that holiness is not, and nowhere sin and sickness can abide in reality. This is the thought that cures, that God is everywhere present. That means that I am everywhere present. It does not make distinctions among unrealities, nor does it seek to heal what is not sick, unmindful where the need for healing is. the need for healing is where? Here in the mind. Not here, like in the body, because the mind's not in the body, but here in the mind. It says this is not magic. This is no magic. In the world, we use magic. We come up with what? Man-made cures to try to what? Bring comfort to what we believe is ourself. That's magic. It says, but it is merely an appeal to the truth, which cannot fail to heal and heal forever. It is not a thought that judges an illusion by its size, its seeming gravity, or anything that relates to form it takes. All illusions take forms. It says, but it merely focuses on what is, and knows that no illusion can be real. No illusion is real. That which is real does not exist. So what if it seemed to exist? It's just a temporary experience, like passing clouds. So once we peel back all that we have layered on, what is revealed is reality. What is revealed is the true self. What is revealed is the oneness of God with all his creation. And it is in that knowing that heals and cures forever. So today, let us try to seek to cure what cannot suffer sickness. Healing must be sought, but where is it? And then applied to what is sick so that it can be cured. There is no remedy the world provides that can affect a change in anything. Not permanently. There is no remedy the world provides that can affect a change in anything. The mind that brings illusions to the truth is really what's changed. What's really changed is the mind that brings illusions to the truth. That is what's really changed. And so a healed mind, that's what it does. A mind that is healed and cured, it brings every illusion that it ever given credence to, it brings it to the truth. And the truth, what? The truth consumes it. There is no change but this. For how can one illusion differ from another, but in attributes that have no substance, no reality, no core, and nothing that is truly different? So all the different appearances that we see in the world. They say, look here, look there, lo here, lo there. Here's the kingdom, here's the cure. And then Jesus said, what? The kingdom of God is not by observation. Meaning that you won't see the kingdom with your natural eye. It's not in form and it's not in time. He said, they'll say, lo here, lo there. Here's the kingdom. He said, that's not the kingdom. He said, why? He said, but why? For the kingdom of God is you. The kingdom of God is your real self. The kingdom of God is your reality. The kingdom of God is your sinlessness, your guiltlessness, and your fearlessness. That's what the kingdom is. When you come to the awareness that what you remain as God created you. You are innocent, whole and complete, regardless of history, regardless of your own personal history. That is what you are. And that is certain. That is a fact. And it's a matter of fact. And you're going to have to now transcend this world's understanding. You're going to have to transcend the teaching of this world. You're going to have to transcend the belief in separation. You're going to have to transcend it for yourself through mere acceptance of the atonement of who you are, through mere embracing of God's plan for salvation, which is the only thing that can really cure. You may have to stand up right where you are and walk out if you're gonna be free. You may have to just go like Jesus did for 40 days and get away from this world if you're gonna be free. If you're really gonna be cured and made whole. That's what he meant when he said, "What? There's nothing in this world. There's nothing." In other words, there's nothing of reality. It's only a temporary attack on God to keep us bamboozled into believing all of the history. Bamboozled in believing that God is unloving, that love has forgotten some, that love is fickle, that God is fickle. Believe that humanity can make up something to substitute to reality. It cannot happen, and it will not happen. So today we seek to change our minds about the source of sickness, for we seek a cure for all illusions, not another shift among them. So we're not going to be shifting one illusion for another anymore. That's what we do in dreams. It says, but we will today find the source of healing, which is in our minds, because our Father placed it there for us. That's where it is. It is not farther from us than ourselves. It is as near to us as our own thoughts. So close, it is impossible to lose. We need but seek it, and it must be found. We will not be misled today by what appears to us as sick, the body. We won't be misled by what's happening with the body. This is beyond body awareness. What we're talking about today is beyond a physical manifestation. We're talking in the space of heaven. We're talking in the space of eternity. We're talking in the space of reality, which is where we are. Jesus said, "Where I am, there you shall be also." Where is he? In reality. He's no longer in the dream or in the illusion. He has taken off. He has laid down the illusionary body. We have known him in the illusionary body, but know we him no more in that state. Now we have to know him like we know ourselves, in the spirit, in the oneness. That's the way we know, in the oneness, in the reality. We're joined as one with him. That's the way we know God. That's the way we know ourselves. We have to transcend the thinking of this world. We will succeed to the extent to which we realize that there can never be a meaningful distinction made between what is untrue and equally untrue. What is an illusion and what is another illusion? Here there are no degrees. In heaven, there's no degrees. There's no levels. You know how we say, God gonna take us to another level. There's no levels in reality. There's only the truth. There's no degrees in reality. There's no levels or degrees in you. You are the real McCoy. It says, and no belief that what does not exist is truer in some forms than another. We have transformed the forms. That's why Peter picks up and says, what? Look not at the things that are seen. Why? Because the things that are seen are what? Temporary, subject to change. He said, but the things that are not seen, what's not seen? What's not seen, it is really seen, but it's not seen with the natural eye. He said, what is not seen is eternal. That's talking about you and me. We are eternal. That which is not seen is eternal. I mean, it's changeless. It's unalterable. It's in its original state. He said, look at that. How do you look at that? Well, you can't look at that through the natural eye. That's seen through what? The singleness, the oneness. It's seen through the vision of Christ. It's seen through what Christ consciousness. Oh my God. Hallelujah. He said, and all of them are false and can be cured because they are not true. Falsity can be cured because it's not true. Unreality can be cured. Why? Because it's not true. Illusions can be what cured because what? They're not true. They're not real. So today, do we lay aside all of our trinkets, our charms and medicines, our chants and bites of magic in whatever form they may take. We will be still and listen for the voice of healing, which will cure all ills as one, restoring sameness to the Son of God, or to what? God's creation, or to you and me. We get that sanity restored to us when we lay down all the illusions, all the forms of them, all the appearance of them. When we withdraw our endorsement in the lie. No voice but this can cure. Today we hear a single voice which speaks to us of the truth, where all illusions end and peace returns to the eternal, quiet home of God. We live in a world in 2022 where we have advanced greatly in our ability of universal communication. There's all kinds of platforms where the world has been made so small because we can know what's happening in the world in a nanosecond as it happens. Be brought right into that situation, right into that appearance. And those technologies are good when they're used properly, but when they're used only to promote the separation, to promote the sin, guilt, and fear, to help continue to con humanity, to be conformed, to form humanity in the belief in form and time, when that is converted for its proper use, which I'm using it for its proper use by being here on this platform, can be accessed around the world, sharing this light and this love and this truth. See, God takes everything we create or everything we make and what? He gives it good purpose. But we live in a world where the lie has become the truth. We live in a world where we have an upside down orientation in all these different facets, all the different arenas of life: religion, politics, the arts, entertainment, sports, business, society has taken the big lie and taken all the technological advancements to advance the lie to where people are absolutely asleep at the wheel and have accepted the lie of the ego that there is separation and division. And we see all of the atrocities in the world. We see what you would think would call wise or smart people. You see them bury their heads in the sand to promote separation, to promote inequality, to promote cultural, ethical, racial supremacy, to see where nations are warring against nations, to see where greed of corporations and greed of contractors are so greedy, are so deceived that they believe that loading the pockets as much as they can is the way. Where we see where there are billions of guns and ammunitions being stored and stockpiled by human beings in anticipation of the big showdown. This is how darkness gets when we reject the truth. Where one race only see that their race is worthy. Where one nation only sees that their nation is worthy. This is how dark it can get. And we're here in this hour observing this. Some of us are promoting this. And we're turning our heads. We're looking for humanity to save us. And so here come the great hope. And the great hope is the biggest liar of them all. The big deceiver of them all. And they have buried their reasoning in the sand to promote the lie. This is how dark gets. When we put up defenses against the truth of who we are. When we don't promote the reality of our oneness with each other and the love that we are to each other. We become total enemies to the truth. But that's only for a season. Why? Because God promised. Why? Because illusions don't make real. Why? Because God has placed healing in our minds. And He would promise that all will eventually wake up. And so in the meantime, and in the between time, be at peace, knowing the reality of the truth. Be at peace. Be the light of the world. That's your function now. Be the forgiver of the world. Be the forgiver of the dream. That's our role. Allow the truth that transforms, the truth that is true always, to be your guide. Don't be taken away by appearances. Don't be frustrated and all upset over these institutions. Don't look at them and say, well, this must be the truth if it doesn't reflect love. If it's promoting hatred and separation and vitriol, Jesus said you would know them by their fruit. And that ain't the kingdom. That ain't reality. That's an indication that that idea is still asleep. That person that's holding on to that idea is still asleep. And having nightmares. There's no peace in that. There's no peace in hatred. There's no peace in sin consciousness, guilt, or fear. People that promote that kind of stuff, they believe in sin and guilt and fear. And they want to judge you as a sinner and say that you're guilty. And they want to what? They want to what? Charge you to punishment. And so they become the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And so they say, well, we got to get rid of these people. Or we got to get rid of this country. Oh, we got to get rid of this kind. We got to get rid of the kind that loves this way, or we got to get rid of this group because they make choice. They have freedom of choice, but we don't want them to have that choice. So we got to get rid of them because they are we're the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Based on what? What are you judging? What is your judgment based on? Is it based on love? It certainly ain't based on God. And so you try to hold the entire universe hostage to your prejudices. You try to hold the entire universe hostage to your unbelief. You try to hold the entire universe, the entire species of humanity hostage to your insane thinking, to your guilt, to your own sin consciousness, and to your own fears. And so you use fear-based theology. You use fear-based politics. You run fear-based corporations. You create all this specialness for just a certain few. And you say you're doing it in the name of God. Well, you're doing it in your sleep, and you're dreaming, and you're having a nightmare. And the day is coming that you shall wake up. And that's the good news. That's what we're talking about here. That's what we can be sure of. That's what we can be certain about. That all that which is formed in time was coming to a place where it says, there's a better way. Why? Because God has set a bound. As we said on yesterday, you won't always be able to promote separation. There is a limit. There is a place of tolerance. You won't always be able to just do it. It's coming to an end. So, we waken hearing him and let him speak to us today. At the beginning of our day and at the end of our day. Just we're going to sit quietly for 5 minutes and let God speak to us concerning our only salvation can be said to cure. Our only preparation is to let our interfering thoughts be laid aside, not separately, but all of them as one. So like I say, just let all of our pasts be laid aside. It doesn't serve you anymore. What serves you is the now moment of hearing the voice that speaks the truth that is true always. All of our interfering thoughts, they're all the same. All of that stuff that we've heard, we've seen, that have promoted separation, it's all the same, no matter what the form. Just let it go. Don't keep rehearsing it in your mind. That's what the ego wants you to do. I want you to make a memorial out of your dream. Making memorials out the dream is not a cure. It don't bring peace. It says they're all the same. We have no need to make them different and thus delay the time when we can hear our Father speak to us. We hear him now. We come to him today with nothing in our hands in which to cling. Why? We laid it all aside. And with lifted hearts and listening minds, we pray this prayer. Only salvation can be said to cure. Speak to us, Father, that we may be healed. Hallelujah. And we will feel salvation cover us with soft protection and with peace so deep that no illusion can disturb our minds, nor offer proof to us that it is real. This will we learn today, and we will say our prayer for healing hourly. And take a minute as the hour strikes to hear the answer to our prayer be given us as we attend in silence and enjoy. This is our exercise for today. This is the day when healing comes to us. This is the day when separation ends and we remember who we really are. It is in the remembrance of the self. Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. Do what? Lay it all aside. Lay all illusions aside and come before your God with wholly empty hands. Without a religion, without a book. Lay it all aside and stand in this present moment and hear but the Father speak to us that we are who He created us to be, and that remains forever and ever, unchanging and unaltered. And truly, the real you does love you, and so do I, and so do God. Because the real you is love, and so love yourself. For you are love. Thank you so much. That is the end of Workbook Lesson 140. It was great. It was good. Tomorrow we start a 10-day review session. So be back and we'll be reviewing the light, not the darkness. We're going to be reviewing what? The light. So have a great day. And for all you fathers out there, happy Father's Day. Bye-bye.